In the kingdom of Briador, beauty was the greatest blessing. The inhabitants of the villages were obsessed with it. Those who were blessed with beauty held high status and were given great opportunities. The royal family was the most beautiful of all the land, but this story is not about them. Well, not entirely. This story begins with a young couple expecting their first child. The young woman, Adelea, was a daring beauty from a high-class family. Her husband Asher was a kind-hearted and smart man who had won her heart not with his looks but with his mind. This had been shocking to everyone because Adelea was utterly consumed with all things beautiful. But Asher had a way of making one look past his physical appearance. His voice, wit, and mere presence gave off an aura of handsomeness, although his face was not. Adelea had reached her 8th month of pregnancy and was becoming very apprehensive about giving birth. "What if it's deformed?" she would constantly ask Asher. Each time she addressed her fears to him, he would calmly rub her belly and assure her that all would be well and they would have the perfect little one. One day, as they were riding home from the marketplace, they encountered an old woman in tattered clothing. Her face was quite dirty, but it did not hide her wrinkled skin. She was dragging a green sack as she limped along the road. "We must help her," Asher said, stopping their horse. "No," whispered Adelea. "She scares me." Asher's conscience would not allow him to let an old woman limp along an abandoned road at night. Against Adelea's wishes, he helped her into their carriage and took her home with them. The old woman was very thankful. She explained that after her beloved son had died, she had been very lonely. Her son had been her only company and used to take good care of her. Now that she was all alone in life, she had been traveling to different towns just to pass the time and keep from feeling empty. She had a passion for praying in different places of worship in every town she visited. Yesterday, her horse had scared and threw her off his back before running away and leaving her with a hurt leg. Asher had been the first to stop and help her, although he was far from the first passerby. Over the course of the next week, Asher nursed the old woman back to health. He thoroughly enjoyed her company. They would sit in the early mornings, laughing and conversing over tea, while Adelea kept to her room, making excuses of morning sickness or being too tired. On the 8th day of her stay, he found the old woman awake, earlier than usual. She told him she was ready to set back on her journey. Asher was sad at the thought of her leaving. She had been the one person who had not seemed to care about appearances, and this made her seem more human than anyone else he had ever met. The old woman embraced him and thanked him. Then handing him a beautiful gold necklace with an emerald stone, she said, "Tell your wife not to worry about the child. It will be perfect. You will have 4 children, each one more beautiful than the last. For here in this strange place, that seems to be all that is cared about." She squeezed his hand and left the necklace in his palm. "Give this to the youngest." She then pulled away and patted his back lightly. "Thank you for all of your kindness." Asher opened his mouth to question about the previous statements, but he found no words would escape his lips. He managed only a nod. The woman had a far-off look in her eyes as she gave him one last smile and rode away on the horse Asher had given her. It was only after she left that he remembered he had never gotten her name. When Asher told Adelea what the old woman had said, she was quite skeptical. "That woman doesn't know what she's talking about," she said, dismissing the conversation entirely. Asher did not show her the necklace. Instead, he kept it hidden in a box under the floorboard. On the 19th of the month, Adelea gave birth to a handsome baby boy. No one had ever seen a baby so handsome after just emerging from the womb. Adelea was ecstatic. Her child was the talk of the village. As he got older, he only grew more handsome. His black curls, hazel eyes, and creamy tan complexion offset his plump, perfect-shaped lips. Adelea took great pleasure in just looking at her son. She named him Samir. Sometime after Samir turned 3, Adelea gave birth to another child, this one a girl. She was also gorgeous from the second she was born, and like her brother, her looks grew better with time. She had the same black curls as Samir, and almond-shaped hazel eyes. They shared the same complexion, but everything about her was more astounding. She was very pleasing to look at. Asher named her Manera after his mother. Adelea was delighted at her great fortune. She had begun to believe what the old woman had said, and by her 3rd pregnancy, she was overflowing with curiosity. She wondered how this new child could look any better than her 2 marvelous children. Because news had spread of Asher and Adelea's children, many had come to witness this birth. They all wanted to be the first to see this new child. On the 12th of the month, Adelea gave birth to another daughter. This girl was by far the most exquisite beauty anyone had ever seen. Adelea held her newborn out for the crowd of villagers to see. There were cheers and applause for the little one. The family decided on the name Adair. Adair was a striking beauty. Her green eyes were big and round. Her hair was dark brown with natural hints of honey blonde. Her nose was a perfect shape, and it complemented her perfect lips. And as she grew older, like her siblings, her looks only got more intriguing. Adelea was the happiest she had ever been. People from far-off towns would come, bearing gifts in exchange to see her darling children. Asher hated all the attention, but he put up with it for his wife's sake. He loved to see her happy, and he adored all his children, but not for the reasons everyone else did. Only he noticed how caring and smart Samir was, how Manera had a brilliant imagination. And Adair, well, she was like her mother, obsessed with her looks, but he liked how passionate she was about what she believed in, even if her beliefs were displaced. He would fix that in due time. In the meantime, they had a happy family. Asher's in-laws, who once hated him, were now very welcoming. Some time passed, and Adelea once again became pregnant. Asher asked her to keep this pregnancy a secret, but Adelea could not withhold her joy, and once you tell one loose-mouthed person, you have told the world. It wasn't long before everyone knew. Midway through the pregnancy, a government official from the royal palace came to visit them. He had news from the king. The royal family had heard of their luck with bearing children and were amazed. The official told them that the queen was currently with child and wanted to ask for Asher and Adelea's future child's hand in marriage. This was the queen's 6th pregnancy, and she was hoping for her first son. Royal blood was not a factor for male marriages in the royal family, since the royals were bred to be good-looking. So in their eyes, securing a marriage with Asher and Adelea's child would be assuring their future heirs would be perfect. This logic bothered Asher, but how do you say no to the king? He knew this was more of a command than a suggestion. The official went on to mention that if the queen had a son and Adelea a daughter, then the child would be sent to the palace at the age of 5 to get a proper upbringing and be a fit bride. This was all a dream come true to Adelea, but for Asher, it was more of a nightmare. That night, he started praying that he had a son or that the queen had another daughter, whichever would be fine. But on December 4th, the queen gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Asher continued to secretly pray for a son while he knew his entire family prayed against him. On the 7th of May, Adelea went into labor. Because of all Adelea's bragging, the fact that this baby may be the future princess was known by all. When news of the labor reached the villagers, many came out to await the birth. Asher sat out the delivery room, anxiously awaiting the news. He held his head in his hands and tapped his foot on the floor nervously. Suddenly, he heard loud screams coming from the delivery room, followed by a crash. He rushed in and found both the midwife and Adelea staring at the crib with horrifying looks. He heard no cry, so his immediate thought was that his wife had given birth to a stillborn. He rushed to the crib and peered down. His eyes were met by a healthy baby girl, her black eyes staring up at him. She was very alert, breathing heavily, although no cry escaped her lips. Asher noticed the skin discoloration immediately. It began on her left cheek, stretching down her neck and arm. This baby was not like her previous siblings. No, she was not ugly. Besides the discoloration, she was fairly ordinary. Asher picked up his little one and wrapped her in a blanket. Adelea was still laying on the bed, horrified. Asher brought the baby to her and held her out. Adelea shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Look at it," she cried. "We can't show this to the villagers." Asher was greatly disturbed by the way his wife referred to their new baby. It was in that moment he realized the harsh reality of the life this child would face. Even her own mother was disturbed by the sight of her. He blinked back his own tears and held the baby even tighter. Then he began to walk towards the door. Adelea yelled at him to stop, but he paid her no mind. He opened the door. The eager villagers stood in crowds, all straining to see what was going on. Asher held up his tiny daughter. "This is the newest addition to our family." There were loud gasps, followed by whispers and snickering. Others in the back of the crowd pushed forward to see. Asher could make out words: ugly, strange. He cleared his throat loudly and spoke firmly. "Her name is Belle, and if any of you have something to say about her, comments, concerns, or even so much as a question, you can take it up with my sword." This silenced the crowd, for Asher was known amongst the people to be a master at any weapon he touched. He knew this wouldn't silence them forever, but he vowed to keep his daughter close, and as long as he was around, she was safe. Later that night, a government official who had been in the crowd informed Asher that after notifying the king about the baby, they were no longer interested in her marrying the prince. This caused Adelea even more grief. She locked herself in her room for the next week, claiming to be sick and refusing to nurse or hold the baby. Belle was not ugly, but to Adelea and the villagers, who were expecting the most beautiful creature to grace the earth, she may as well have been a goblin. Asher bought a goat and milked it every day. He bottle-fed Belle. Her siblings were very inquisitive about their new sister. Asher told them that she was special, just like they were, and they must always take care of her. Years went by, and Belle grew up into a young girl. Asher noticed she was very smart and learned quite quickly. She had a photogenic memory, and by the age of 4, she was reading and writing. None of this mattered to Adelea. Asher noticed the way she avoided looking at her youngest daughter, and if her eyes ever did land her way, they were not kind. She never addressed her as Belle, but used pronouns like her or she. And ever since the moment Asher had shown her to the crowds, Adelea's attitude towards him had changed. He hated to see this side of her. There were moments when he couldn't remember what he ever saw in her. Had he, too, been so caught up in just beauty? Had the lovely appearance of Adelea been the only reason he had pursued her in the first place? These thoughts disturbed him. Things shouldn't be this way. Nothing should be this way. He thought back to the old nameless woman he had met years ago. Why had she told him what she did? Why did he even believe it? He hated himself for ever mentioning it to Adelea. He wondered, would things have been different if he had left her on that abandoned road that night? "We cannot change the past," he said, aloud, one day while chopping wood. In that moment, he made the decision not to give Belle the necklace the old woman had left. He decided it was better to forget all about that.